One simply couldn't breathe in the cramped room that the inexperienced trailblazers proudly referred to as the workshop. It happened due to the tobacco smoke. However, the group of men paid no attention to this unpleasant circumstance. Only Olivio Vega diligently waved away the bluish clouds and muttered under his breath, "Guys, stop smoking, there's nothing to breathe." Ignacio Kano, whom everyone simply called Ignacio the Sailor, burst into loud laughter. "And you, David, instead of groaning like a woman in labor, should just take the bad example and give it a try yourself. Take a few puffs, and life will seem awesome." The local beer aficionado delivered the last phrase in an advertising tone and burst into laughter again. But Olivio just smiled and looked disapprovingly at his comrade. "No way, bro. I won't poison myself. I've never been into that stuff, and I don't advise it to you either." Samuel Torres, the youngest in the gang of railroad workers, finished another sandwich and wiped his hands on his greasy overall. "Olivio's got a point. I'm planning to quit smoking too. My wife found a plan for me, she dug it up somewhere on the internet. So, if I stick to it, I can become a non-smoker in just 2 weeks." Ignacio the Sailor said with a condescending smile, "All these plans are for suckers like you, Samuel. Personally, I'm not giving up small pleasures. Life is short as it is." Speaking as the senior, Rodrigo Pena said, "Guys, you've switched to the wrong topic. You probably forgot that the main reason for our gathering today is our comrade's birthday, and you could even say, the hard workers, Olivio." Ignacio slapped his knee with force. "Oh, right. We've deviated from the truth. And that means, for some mental clarity, we need to drink another one." Ignacio ceremoniously lifted the bottle and skillfully filled his glass like a magician. "So, gentlemen, let's fill them to the brim, and I'll propose a toast for our David." The sailor either chuckled or hiccuped in embarrassment and ran his fingertips over his plump lips. "I'm sorry, friends, for my clumsiness. I just expressed myself in such a manner. In short, Olivio, I'll be brief, otherwise, the liquid in our vessels might boil over. Wishing you health in all your bodies and pockets full of money." The other participants in the group followed the Toastmaster's example and emptied their glasses. Taking advantage of the pause, the sailor continued developing the theme of the day. "Olivio, with all our respect for you, I must say something," Ignacio said. The birthday man raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Ignacio, I don't get it. What are you hinting at?" The sailor didn't even have a chance to open his mouth before Samuel beat him to it. "Ignacio wants to say that you didn't inform us about your upcoming birthday. If we didn't know you well, we might think you don't want to celebrate." Samuel rattled off his words, but he couldn't escape punishment. The sailor gave him a solid smack. "Rookie, you always stick your nose where it's not wanted. In the Navy, they punish such liberties without mercy. Just shut up and listen to the grown men." Samuel tried to protest. "Ignacio, why do you always belittle me? By the way, I'm a perfectly grown, independent person. I even managed to get married." The sailor looked down at the young man condescendingly. "Samuel, a man's level of maturity is determined by his intelligence, not by marriage." The men burst into laughter together. Even the usually serious Rodrigo started laughing uncontrollably. "Oh, Ignacio, you've got a big mouth. Why hurt the lad? Maybe things are different for the modern youth, and they think about things in a different way than we used to." Samuel jumped as if he'd been stung in a sensitive spot. But Ignacio grabbed his hand. "Sit down and stop fussing. You need to be able to take criticism. You're getting offended like a girl. That's not acceptable in the Navy. They break people like that quickly." The sailor refilled the glasses. "I hope, Olivio, you won't mind if I propose a toast for those at sea? It's a tradition in the Navy that the third toast is always for those far from their native shores." Samuel's mouth was already open, but Rodrigo shot him such an expressive look that he lost his words. David was the first to drink, the others followed him. Among my friends were those who dedicated their lives to the sea. One of my acquaintances was part of the crew of the Marine. He was transferred to that submarine just before August of 2000, right before the catastrophe. A lengthy pause hung in the air, and Ignacio realized that he needed to steer the company away from the negativity. "Hey, guys, this isn't going well. We're not at a wake here. Let's have another 5 drops each, and I'll tell you about something that happened to me just the other day." Rodrigo winked at Olivio. "Get ready for Ignacio's stand-up." The sailor leisurely took a sip and bit into a lemon wedge. "All jokes, Olivio, come from real life. On the last shift, I was doing my rounds. Remember when it rained for a whole day? But duty is duty, so I put on my raincoat and went to inspect my section. Since I couldn't use my bicycle, I went on foot. I trudged about 2 miles from the station, maybe more. And it was starting to get dark, and the weather, oh my God. So, I'm walking, and I see something moving on the tracks in the distance. The first thing that came to mind was that someone fell from exhaustion. And right on schedule, a fast train was supposed to pass. Well, I picked up my pace. I'm running and thinking, as if I needed to witness someone else's death. Ignacio was an excellent storyteller, and within a minute, all the men were sitting, frozen in anticipation of the punchline. Samuel even opened his mouth, and an involuntary exclamation escaped him. "Horrible! So who was on the tracks, Ignacio?" The sailor gave everyone a meaningful look. A mermaid was sitting there. A real mermaid, with a tail and fins. Rodrigo slapped his knee, but he must not have gauged his strength right, as he winced in pain. "Ignacio, you'll drive us to sin with your tall tales. How can a mermaid end up on a railroad track, for heaven's sake? You didn't have a sip of holy water before your rounds, did you? What are you saying, Rodrigo? How could you think badly of me? I don't break discipline on the job. Then how do you explain a mermaid on the tracks?" The sailor wasn't even fazed. "When I was in the Navy, I caught the mermaid tribe's attention somehow. And for almost a quarter of a century now, they've been haunting me. Not even my purely land-based profession can deter them." Olivio halted the joker. "Ignacio, stop lying. I had a similar incident last year, but it was a young elk that got caught in a trap. I barely managed to free it from the clutches of death. But a mermaid, that's something entirely different." He made a spiraling motion with his hand, ascending upward. Ignacio poured a bit of alcohol into his glass and downed it. "Don't believe me? I thought you wouldn't. That's why I captured my mermaid on my phone. Here, take a look." The sailor's mobile phone passed from hand to hand, but the men couldn't utter a word. Only Samuel stammered in bewilderment. "It's really a mermaid. And she's got the whole look, just missing the seaweed." The sour faces of the comrades brought joy to Ignacio, and he even hummed something resembling a circus march. "Guys, I nearly died of fright there. Imagine, evening, rain, forest nearby, and this siren right on the tracks. And the solution was simple. The girl got left behind by her troupe. She and her group of performers were traveling around towns and villages to entertain kids. She was assigned the role of a mermaid. They didn't give her enough lines, so she got upset. During the breaks between performances, she drowned her sorrows in strong drinks and overdid it. But she probably wasn't the only one in the crew like that. When she needed to relieve herself, she decided to get off the road for some privacy. And when she returned, the vehicles were gone." The sailor's story intrigued Samuel. "Ignacio, what happened next?" The man shrugged. "Nothing much, really. I took the mermaid, carried her to the police station. She could hardly move on her own, the tail was in the way, and it seemed she drank too much out of frustration. When the officers saw who I brought them, they laughed nonstop for an hour. But then they filled out the paperwork and sent the mermaid back to her place of residence." Olivio thanked his comrade. "Thanks, Ignacio, you've really entertained us tonight too. Honestly, I haven't had such a heartwarming birthday in a while. Rodrigo threatened him with his finger. And you wanted to hide this fact from us in your biography. Thanks to Pablo, he told us. The only downside, Olivio, is that you have a shift today. If you had warned us earlier, I or Samuel could have taken your place. Samuel nodded in agreement. Of course, I would have swapped with you. It wouldn't feel right to work on your own birthday. Yeah, I haven't paid much attention to such events for a while now. But thanks to you, guys, for the company. You've warmed my soul today. The sailor couldn't miss the opportunity to add. We're always ready. Especially when there's alcohol. We'd stand in for you without any adventures. After Ignacio's story, mermaids will start appearing everywhere for me. The guys started to disperse quietly, and Olivio quickly cleared away the remnants of the festive table. He looked at his watch and said in a hurry, "It's already 7:30. I need to have time to check the main section before the express train comes through." He put on his jacket with reflective elements, headed for the exit, but at the door, he bumped into the cashier, Syrah. She was holding something close to her chest and exclaimed in surprise, "Oh, Olivio, are you leaving already? And I was just coming to see you. I noticed the guys were heading home, so I thought I'd visit you." Olivio stood there, not knowing what to say to this lovely woman, who had been giving him very clear signs of attention for a while now. "Sorry, Syrah, I'm in a rush. It's getting dark already, and I'm about to do my rounds." The woman looked flustered. "I won't keep you for long. I just wanted to treat you to some homemade pastries. After all, it's your birthday today, so I thought." Olivio felt awkward and was about to decline the treat, but he noticed Syrah's hands trembling as she was nervous and realized that refusing would hurt her. "Thank you, Syrah." The woman brightened up. "Help yourself. There are cabbage and meat pastries, as well as some donuts. I'm not sure about your culinary preferences, so I decided to make a variety. After all men love cabbage and meat pastries." She looked at him expectantly, and in that gaze, Olivio saw hope for the most ordinary female happiness. He took the package. "Thanks a lot. But I alone can't eat this much. I wouldn't want such delicious treats to go to waste. And I make the dough using a special recipe, so my pastries stay fresh for several days." He didn't want to go back to the workshop, so he put the bag of pastries into his travel bag. As Olivio walked away, he could sense Syrah's gaze. But he didn't turn back. He just thought, how many birthdays have there been in my life? But this might be the first in many years that brought me a little joy. Over the years of his work, Olivio had become well acquainted with the route. During the obligatory rounds, he would contemplate the quirks of his life. In his distant youth, he used to enjoy holidays with his circle of friends. But then, after the tragedy that happened to him, everything changed drastically, and Olivio began to hate even his own birthdays. Today, in the morning, he also thought with irritation that another joyless year of his life had passed. But his co-workers and Syrah with her treat struck chords in his soul that he had thought had long stopped resonating. It was evident by the August evenings that autumn was about to come. The days had also noticeably grown shorter, so by the time Olivio reached the final point of his inspection round, it was already quite dark. Right on schedule, the express train roared past, scattering gravel in various directions. Olivio muttered, "It's time to turn on our little flashlight, otherwise I might run into some trouble on my own birthday." He reached into his bag of tools for a signal flashlight and felt something warm. He exclaimed, "Is it a pastry from Syrah? Perfect time for a snack." He looked around and spotted the remains of a small wooden structure not far away. Until recently, it had been a small shelter where one could take cover from rain and wind. Olivio leaned against the rickety wall and pulled out some still warm baked goods from the package. What a treat! The aroma of homemade pastries alone awakened an incredible appetite within him, and he sent a message of gratitude to the caring cashier into the darkness. "Thank you once again, Syrah." This daring act ignited a youthful ardor in the soul of the mature man, and he winked at the stars peering down at him from above. What do you think? Could happiness come into my life as well? The celestial lanterns responded with cheerful twinkles. But suddenly, in the midst of his evening feast, his mobile phone rang. During his rounds, Olivio always tucked his device into the inner pocket of his jacket. This call caught him off guard, and he hastily wiped his hands on the withered grass. Damn it! Who tries to reach me at such an inconvenient time? Unexpectedly, a thought pierced his mind that it might be his son who finally remembered his father's birthday. The man exclaimed with delight, "I've been waiting all day for you to call me, and you remembered me only in the night." The mobile phone persistently continued ringing, and without difficulty, he retrieved the device from his pocket. Without even glancing at the illuminated screen, he immediately shouted, "Julio, why so late?" But instead of his son, a familiar female voice answered, and an icy feeling filled his chest. "Olivio, it's me. Julio can't call, we're in big trouble." The voice of his ex-wife broke into sobs. Olivio anxiously shouted, "Agata, explain clearly what happened. What kind of trouble did you just mention? Can I help with anything?" All these questions remained unanswered, and the sound of sobbing continued on the phone. For a minute, he tried to calm the woman down, and finally, she managed to say, "Olivio, you'd better come. And if possible, do it as soon as you can. Agata, could you please explain what happened there? Olivio, come over. Our son, Julio, is sick." "I'm sorry, I can't say more." Short beeps were heard, and the man couldn't move from his spot. He was in a shock, and in almost 1 second, nearly 50 years of his life flashed before his eyes. A loud horn from a locomotive pulled him out of his stupor. Olivio looked at his watch and said in confusion, "It's a freight train. That means it's already 10:30. His nerves instantly tensed, and his brain started working frantically on what he needed to do in the coming hours and minutes. The man leapt onto his bicycle and, within half an hour, was at the station. The building was empty except for the night watchman and the cashier. Sarah was just closing up her booth. She looked at Olivio with surprise. "Did something happen? You don't look like yourself." The man was lost in his gloomy thoughts, so he responded almost indifferently. "Yes, something happened, and I need to leave urgently. But I'm in complete disarray, not sure what to do next. I only know one thing, I need to leave immediately." He cast a hopeful gaze at the woman, and Sarah immediately suggested the only right solution. "You need to take a plane, it'll be faster. Juana, my daughter, should be here soon. She always meets me when I work the evening shift. She has that, what's it called? Smartphone. You can quickly get all the information about the nearest flights and even book a ticket." "That's a good idea. But how will I get to the airport? My old car won't handle the load, it'll fall apart halfway there." "You can call Samuel. I'm sure he won't refuse to help you." Everything that happened next felt like a surreal dream. The cashier's daughter checked the schedule and booked a ticket for the next flight. Just 10 minutes after the call, Samuel pulled up in his brand new Audi. The young man didn't know the reason for the alarm and cheerfully said, "Personal taxi for the birthday boy has arrived. Although I'll have to let my little brother do the driving. You see, I had a bit to drink at your birthday party recently. It's all faded from my mind, but I don't want to risk any trouble." Olivio thanked the young man. "Thank you, Samuel, for your assistance. I really don't care who's driving, as long as I don't miss my flight. It's at 8:30. I still need to notify my boss that I have an emergency situation." Olivio dialed the number of his school friend, Pablo Reyes. Despite the late hour, his boss picked up immediately. "Olivio, I'm already aware. The guard called and informed me that you were in trouble. Go, we'll deal with the formalities later. I've already notified Rodrigo, he agreed to cover for you." For over 20 years, Olivio hadn't flown on airplanes. He rarely left the small town where his childhood had passed. He didn't remember his father, and only through his mother's stories did he know that Olivio Vega was a highly respected man. Like most men in the Vega family, Valerio dreamed of becoming a train engineer. After graduating from the Railway Technical School, he spent several years as an assistant and then became a conductor on the vast network of the country's railways. It seemed that everything was laid out in clear steps in the destiny of this young, never disappointed guy, and only luck accompanied him along the way. But one day, chance intervened in the smooth flow of his everyday life, and Valerio's life was cut short at its peak. He was killed by a gang's hand when he stood up for an elderly woman. Olia felt it was her duty to carefully preserve the memory of her husband's heroic act. She often told her young son how his father saved a complete stranger. Dad was returning home after a trip. He got off at the station when it was almost midnight and took a shortcut home through the park. There, he noticed suspicious shadows and then heard a woman's cry for help. By her voice, he recognized it was the elderly cashier and rushed to help her. A man dressed all in black had grabbed the poor woman by the throat. Your dad didn't hesitate and confronted him. He didn't even realize at first that the criminal had stabbed him. He thought he had just been hit hard in the stomach. Only later did he notice that his clothes were soaked in blood. Paula, the cashier he saved, immediately called an ambulance. But by the time the medics arrived, Dad had lost consciousness. Olivio knew that his father wouldn't die right away. After the serious injury, he even started recovering, but then his condition rapidly worsened, and 8 days after the tragic event, he passed away. And they were left alone, Olia and him. Olia couldn't love anyone else and dedicated her entire life to raising her only son. From a young age, she instilled in him, Olivio, your father really wanted you to become a train engineer too. So, try your best and study well. The young boy didn't understand much and bombarded his mother with questions. Mama, how do you know what Dad wanted? He's dead, and the dead can't talk. The woman smiled and affectionately tousled her son's golden curls. When you were born, your dad immediately said you would continue the dynasty of railway workers. Olivio would immediately ask a follow-up question. But Mom, do the train engineers in the train look like kings? Only kings have these, what's it called, dynasties. Our teacher told us. Olia patiently had to explain to her son that dynasties existed in the world of doctors, teachers, and many other professions. And Olivio came to terms with the idea that he would have to carry on the legacy of his ancestors. He focused his attention on books describing the work of train engineers. Every year on his birthday, his mom would give him themed toys, steam engines, or a model train set. But in middle school, everything changed abruptly for Olivio, and he started to have a new hobby and a completely different main goal in life. These changes were connected with the arrival of a young physical education teacher, Arturo Blanco, to their school. Olivio, like many of his peers, had a special fondness for active pastimes. During the summer, he played ball with the guys on the school stadium, and in the winter, he would take out his hockey stick wrapped in blue tape. This well-worn piece of equipment was the young boy's most prized possession. Olivio dreamed that one day he would have a real hockey stick, one like the players of the legendary Red Machine had. But his thoughts didn't go beyond dreaming, because the boy realized that his mother wouldn't be able to afford such an expensive piece of sports equipment. After every street match in winter, Olivio would patiently repair his tool. Olia silently watched her son and sighed because she couldn't fulfill her son's dream. But one day, she advised him, Olivio, why don't you join a school sports section? There, they'll provide you with a good hockey stick and uniform. Women at work were saying that a new physical education teacher had been sent to your school, and it seems like he used to play on a junior team. The advice simultaneously delighted and surprised the young boy. Mom, thanks for the useful information. We really have a new PE teacher. But I had no idea he played hockey. The next day, the middle school boy found a convenient moment to talk face-to-face with the young PE teacher. The opportunity presented itself during a long break when Arturo was heading to the teacher's lounge. Olivio hurried up to him. Arturo, Can I talk to you for a moment? The teacher stopped and looked at the teenager with interest. I'm listening, young man. No one had ever addressed Olivio so maturely, so he felt a bit out of his element, and his former excitement started to wane due to his nerves. But it was too late to back down, and Olivio mumbled quietly. Arturo, could you please enroll me in your section or club? I'm not exactly sure. I really want to play hockey. Arturo looked into the boy's eyes, and Olivio remembered that kind but perceptive gaze of his first coach for the rest of his life. But most of all, it was the teacher's words that stayed etched in his memory. Sports is not just about achieving high performance. A person who seriously dedicates themselves to this endeavor must be able to think logically. Also, they should be able to clearly express those thoughts. The teenager's face and ears turned red with embarrassment, and something unpleasant welled up in his eyes. Olivio wanted to escape, but the PE teacher caught hold of his hand. Wait a moment. It's clear that you're enthusiastic about hockey. Let's discuss this further. Arturo's calm voice and understanding tone gave Olivio a glimmer of hope that his dream might not be so out of reach after all. Wait, I haven't told you everything, the teacher said, looking directly into the teenager's face. There's one more essential condition for an athlete: you must know how to lose. So, which section do you want to join? Olivio took a deep breath and, looking the teacher in the eye, blurted out, I told you, I want to play hockey. Arturo gave the boy an approving pat on the shoulder. That's a whole different matter. I believe I'm not mistaken that I don't teach PE classes for your grade, am I? The teenager briskly responded. No, you're right. I'm in middle school, and you teach students from the senior high school. Well, that's nothing. If you're genuinely interested in this popular sport, come by on Friday evening. We'll see what you're capable of. This important conversation took place on a Wednesday, so Olivio couldn't wait for Friday. Over the next 2 days, he got up early in the morning, went for a jog around his house, and then spent half an hour stretching. Olia understood that something serious was happening with her son, but she didn't ask unnecessary questions. When a neighbor asked, Olia, what's with your Olivio running around like a maniac in the mornings? Is he okay? She replied to the curious woman, Everything's fine, no need to worry about my son. He just decided to seriously engage in sports. The neighbor shook her head disapprovingly, saying, Seems like everyone nowadays is chasing an easy life. My grandkids are running around with a ball too, and I'm not in favor of this trend. If everyone rushes into sports, who will till the land and work on the farm? With a smile, Olia listened to the woman and then said, Sports is not just about fame, it's also hard work that toughens the spirit. And such interest should be encouraged by adults. The neighbor didn't respond, but the expression on her face made it clear that she stuck to her opinion. Finally, the anticipated Friday arrived, and Olivio eagerly awaited the evening. At the appointed time, he timidly entered the sports hall, where a training session was already underway. Arturo waved to him in a friendly manner. Olivio, come over and meet the team. The guys welcomed him warmly, and by the end of the first practice, Olivio felt as if he had trained with these guys for at least a year. But the section had its rules, which were immediately conveyed to the newcomer by the team captain, Santiago Nieto. Olivio, we have very strict requirements here. Arturo set the rule: any violation could lead to being kicked out, so if you're having trouble with your studies, you can forget about training. Swearing, fighting, and using foul language are not allowed. Skipping practices without a valid reason is also on that list, so it's better to evaluate your capabilities right away. But the list of strict restrictions didn't dampen the young athlete's enthusiasm. Instead, it ignited perseverance and determination in him. It happened that Olivio Vega was the youngest on the school team, but after the first few months of regular training, the teenager showed an uncommon talent for his age. Arturo openly admired the boy and often shared with colleagues in the teacher's lounge. This boy is a true diamond. It's a pity that such a talented lad is stuck in a small provincial town. He deserves to be nurtured by the right hands. However, in those days, sports schools in rural areas were rare, and Olivio's mother had no plans to move elsewhere. Fate found its own way to discover this talented junior. One day, Arturo came to training in a cheerful mood and announced, "Guys, next week we're going to the city. There'll be a friendly match against the city team." All the boys cheered in unison. "Hooray! Arturo, we'll show the city kids what real hockey is." Only the team captain, contrary to all logic, sighed disappointingly. "Why are you celebrating? It's a lost cause, we'll definitely lose." But Olivio firmly objected to the pessimist. "Santiago, you're the captain. You should be rallying the team for victory, and with such an attitude, of course, we'll lose. Didn't you forget what Arturo said about believing in victory?" Santiago glared at the audacious kid with disdain and muttered, "It's not the time for you to speak, Olivio. So just sit there and cool down. You're number 16. All the team members burst into laughter. But Olivio wasn't fazed by the amusement. He vigorously defended his opinion. A heated debate erupted among the team members while the coach observed his protégés from the sidelines. At the end of the practice, he called Olivio over, and the team hushed in anticipation. The coach waited for the appropriate pause and then decisively announced, "Guys, I want to make a lineup change for the upcoming game. Olivio will take the position of center forward, and Basilio will move to defense." Santiago gave the coach a sidelong glance but didn't say anything. On that day, the captain realized for the first time that he was losing his authority. It was a blow to the teenager's self-esteem, and he immediately identified the culprit of the unpleasant circumstance, Olivio Vega. The friendly match took place in front of a packed crowd at the regional sports complex, and the substitutions made by the coach had a positive impact on the game. However, throughout the match, Santiago subtly hindered the new forward of the team. But these attempts to undermine Olivio's performance only fueled his determination, and he managed to score 3 goals against the opposing team. As a result, the match ended with a clean victory for Arturo's team. It was the first time the provincial boy had caused such a sensation. The other boys lifted Olivio on their shoulders for a long time, as he had played a lion's share in the victory. People he didn't even know congratulated him and shook his hand. Such public recognition initially shocked the boy, so he tried to escape to the locker room. But as soon as he closed the door of that stuffy space behind him, Arturo appeared, accompanied by an unfamiliar man. "Olivio, Guido Santos wants to meet you." The boy stared at the well-built man with wide eyes and could hardly believe that this was the same coach whose name echoed around the world. Guido was a skilled psychologist and understood what was going on in the teenager's mind. He gave Olivio a friendly pat on the shoulder. "I won't beat around the bush, let's get straight to the point. I'm putting together a new lineup for the junior team. I've been closely watching your game today, and despite the shortcomings, you have the potential for growth. If you're serious about pursuing a career in professional sports, here's your chance." Guido extended his hand, and Olivio shook it as an equal. Subsequent events spiraled rapidly. Guido personally came to the village to talk to the talented boy's mother. Of course, Olivio wasn't present during the conversation that determined his future. But after Guido left, Olia held her son tightly and whispered, "Son, such things come once in a lifetime. Fortune is on your side, and you can't let go of this, perhaps, the only chance." From that day on, life spun at a frenetic pace, and the name Olivio Vega started to appear more frequently in newspapers. Even sports commentators covering important tournaments began to pay attention to the talented forward. Olivio quickly got used to the fact that a trail of loud fame followed him. Along with success came financial stability. At first, he was cautious about rewards, but soon he became accustomed to not restricting himself in any way. He helped his mother and even tried to convince her to move to the city. But Olia persisted. "Son, I've grown accustomed to the village. I've lived here my whole life, and at any moment, I can go visit your father's grave. Olivio knew that his mother regularly visited the cemetery, where she shared her joys and sorrows with the man who had long departed from the living. This attachment weighed heavily on him, and he wanted to change the life of the woman who had given him everything. So, during one of his vacations, he decided to give her an unconventional gift. He organized a complete European-style renovation of their small apartment. At that time, such transformations were a novelty, so for about 6 months, neighbors came to marvel at the wonder. "Great job, Olivio. Look at the living conditions he's provided for his mother. In such comfort, it's not scary to get old." Of course, the young athlete didn't forget about his own well-being. He pursued a degree in physical education through distance learning, struggling to balance exams between various levels of championships. Olivio was making grand plans for the future because he was highly sought after as a foreign player. This unfamiliar term raised concern among many, especially those accustomed to traditional norms. Olia, the same neighbors and colleagues at work would say, "Look, Olia, make sure your son doesn't veer off the wrong path." It's understandable when someone plays for their own team. But chasing a puck around a field for someone else's interest, just for the sake of money, it doesn't sit well with the conscience. However, Olivio paid little attention to such discussions. He was flattered by the fact that well-known hockey clubs were practically vying to secure him. He even viewed his mother's warnings with skepticism. "Mom, playing for money on another team is a normal practice. And all your concerns are unnecessary because nothing bad will happen to me. On the contrary, thanks to my abilities, I'll be able to provide us with a comfortable life." Over time, amid such exaggerated popularity, ambitious tendencies developed within Olivio, and he began to look down on his former classmates and friends. He especially felt offended by the condescending behavior of his friend, Domingo. "Olivio, don't get too carried away, because falling from a height hurts a lot." However, this valid remark also went in one ear and out the other for Olivio. He thought that his school friend was simply envious of his achievements. A quiet rift emerged between the friends, and their paths diverged for many years. But one day, the conceited lucky guy was brought back to his senses by his first coach, Arturo. Their meeting was coincidental when Olivio visited his mother for a few days. On a whim, he went to the school, where he knew Arturo still worked as a physical education teacher. At first, Arturo didn't recognize his former pupil in the handsome, athletic-looking young man. It was only after Olivio rushed to him with open arms that Arturo exclaimed with admiration, "Olivio, I really couldn't recognize you. You've grown up, are too high, and are wearing foreign clothes?" Olivio was most pleased with the last comment. "What can I do, Arturo? I have a small weakness, I love dressing nicely." And at that moment, the coach gave him a straight talk. Any attachment is detrimental to a true athlete. Money, fame, luxurious living, it all erodes the athlete's core. The teacher wanted to add something more, but Olivio, forgetting basic etiquette, interrupted him. "Arturo, are you telling me this because you didn't go further with the junior team yourself? Now, looking at me, do you regret stopping at some point?" A glint of annoyance appeared in Arturo's eyes. "If you think I envy you, you are deeply mistaken. I've just learned to see life soberly, Olivio. Yes, God didn't bless me with the talent you have, and I realized in time that I needed to find a different path in life. Teaching children is also an honorable occupation." Arturo fell silent, hesitating to say the main thing. But the former pupil's arrogant behavior prompted him to speak out. "Remember, Olivio, a sports career is fleeting. I really don't want you to repeat the sad fate of many athletes who quickly faded away. Some of them turned to alcohol, and others fell into hardship." Olivio waved his hand dismissively and interrupted the coach again. "What a gloom you're prophesying to me. Everything will go my way, I'm in demand everywhere. Clubs are lining up to get me." Arturo looked at his former pupil with sadness, bid him goodbye, and hurriedly said, "Sorry, Olivio, I don't have time, I need to go to class. Take care." Only after Arturo disappeared behind the doors of the school gym did the young man realize that the coach had deceived him. What class is in July? He just didn't want to talk to me. Well, fine, I'm not used to begging. Whistling a light tune, Olivio headed to the train station where Olia worked at the cafeteria. However, a gypsy woman blocked his path in a small park. Wait, handsome boy, don't be in a hurry. No matter how hard you try, you can't escape your fate. Give me your hand, and I'll tell you the whole truth. The young man moved away from the fortune teller. I don't believe in all this nonsense. Leave me alone. The gypsy shook her head. Oh, you're so proud of yourself. You're wrong to act this way, young man. Remember, fame is like a husk, it will fly away, leaving nothing behind. Your life will change very soon, you'll suffer greatly. Olivio didn't want to listen to these prophecies, and he walked quickly towards the train station building. However, the fortune teller kept pursuing him. Tonight, you'll perceive my words completely differently. In just a few hours, you'll meet a girl who will become your wife. But she'll leave you. Olivio started running, hoping to get rid of the gypsy woman. When he appeared paled by the cafeteria, Olia asked with surprise. Olivio, what happened? You look so pale. Yeah, some crazy woman latched onto me, started predicting my fate. She spewed all kinds of nonsense. Olia glanced briefly out the window, where the gypsy woman stood, waiting for a new customer. I see, it's Honorata who told you that. She shows up almost every day. The police chase her away, but it's useless. They recently settled in our village, making money from fortune-telling not only for adults, but also for children. But what can we do? These are traditions in gypsy families. Mom, it doesn't bother me because I don't believe in any prophecies. His mother looked at him attentively. People say that Honorata's predictions always come true, everything she says happens. Olivio exclaimed. Mom, I never thought you'd be so superstitious. Forget about all this nonsense and believe in the good. With a calm mind, the young man headed home to relax. He had initially planned to rest at home for 2 or 3 days, but as the evening approached, the coach called him from another city. Olivio, come back urgently. You've caught the attention of a very famous club, whose name I won't disclose for now. But one thing I can say for sure is that the contract is very lucrative, 3 years. Inspired by this news, Olivio shouted into the phone. I'll be there tonight. Thanks for the good news. He hastily packed his travel bag and rushed to the station, hoping to catch the evening train. When he appeared at the cafeteria for the second time that day, Olia exclaimed in surprise. Olivio, where are you heading? The young man smirked. Mom, it seems your Honorata's predictions are starting to come true. The head coach called, he wants to see me. He glanced at his watch and gave a mysterious smile. It's 20 o'clock now, and by midnight, I'm supposed to meet my future bride. That's what the gypsy told me. So, get ready for a wedding, Mom. Olivio kissed his mother on the cheek and leaped onto the train. Olia stood on the platform with a bewildered expression, holding her hands to her chest. 5 minutes later, Olivio had forgotten about the fortune teller's prophecy. He was more concerned about the terms of the new contract. His intuition told him that this time he would be much luckier and would play for the Czechs or Slovaks. When he arrived, he jumped out of the train and nearly knocked over a girl who was trying to balance her enormous suitcase on wheels. The stranger wasn't expecting his appearance and, caught off guard, let go of the handle. The suitcase toppled over on its wheels, and the girl exclaimed in annoyance. What is it? Now I'm definitely stuck here until morning with this cursed suitcase. Olivio behaved like a true gentleman and effortlessly lifted the heavy burden. I'm ready to make up for my mistake. Tell me where to deliver your suitcase. The girl was pleased with the unexpected help and commanded. Take it to the taxi stand. Olivio became enthusiastic. I can even give you a ride. Get in. The girl looked at him in bewilderment. You're quite the provocateur. No thanks, I'd rather walk myself, or people might think I'm crazy. The young man didn't insist on his offer and rolled the suitcase in the direction shown. However, after they had moved about 100 meters, one wheel of the transforming suitcase came off. The girl was frustrated. "You can't trust these peddlers. The guy who sold me this suitcase for an exorbitant price assured me it would last at least 10 years. To keep the conversation going, Olivio also began condemning sellers of poor quality goods. He even mentioned a failed jeans purchase that shrank 6 sizes after the first wash. Olivio hoisted the unfortunate suitcase onto his shoulder while the girl tottered behind him on her high heels. The burden proved heavy even for someone as fit as the willing helper. Olivio struggled to maintain the conversation. Meanwhile, the girl chatted incessantly, telling him about her fabulous vacation in Spain where she had been with her friends. Finally, they arrived at the taxi stand, where a small queue had formed. The girl said casually, without any hint of coquettishness, "You didn't even ask my name. It's the first time in my life." Olivio carefully lowered the burden onto the sidewalk. "I apologize, your cart completely occupied my thoughts. Now that I'm free, I can ask, what's your name?" The girl extended her delicate hand. "Agata. My parents just love everything that falls under the category of unusual or original. They're both quite eccentric. My dad is a psychotherapist, and my mom is a doctor too, but she works with faces and other body parts to create the illusion of beauty." Olivio was struck by how disdainfully the girl spoke about her parents' work. But while he was contemplating this, it was their turn to get a taxi. Agata stated it as if it were a long-resolved issue. "You won't leave me alone with this wheel-less suitcase, will you?" The young man said. "Of course not. I'm ready to take you all the way to your apartment." With the help of the driver, he loaded the suitcase into the trunk and got into the car. "It seems I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Olivio Vega." The taxi driver reacted instantly. Well. Could it be that the real Vega is in my car? The hockey player." Olivio smiled. "Indeed, Commander." The taxi driver handed him his business card. "Listen, then leave your autograph. I collect autographs from celebrities, and they often end up in my car." As it was a habit, Olivio signed the card. Agata couldn't take her curious eyes off him. "Interesting. What are you famous for? Why does the taxi driver know you?" The navigator accelerated and said with satisfaction, "It's all because, my dear lady, girls aren't interested in hockey. Although many dream of becoming the wives of famous athletes." The taxi stopped near Agata's apartment building. Olivio helped her carry her luggage to the apartment and gallantly bid farewell. It was very nice to meet a girl with such an unusual name. Agata grabbed his hand. "Are you really going to leave just like that?" Her voice carried notes of desperation, and Olivio became flustered. "Well, we can talk a little more if you want. But honestly, I don't have much time. My head coach is waiting for me right now. But if you don't mind, we can meet tomorrow." Agata enthusiastically accepted the offer. The next day, Olivio sorted out his affairs and called his new friend. Agata picked up the phone after the first ring, and he realized she might have spent the whole day by the phone. Their romance developed rapidly, but Olivio only remembered the predictions of the gypsy, Honorata, a week later. He was astonished. And everything turned out just as planned. So, fate has led me to marry Agata. Although he didn't particularly have intense feelings for this girl, the prospect of joining his life with hers was pleasant. When he proposed to Agata, she immediately agreed. There was only one slightly unpleasant circumstance that clouded the mood of the future newlyweds. Olivio had to leave right after the wedding. Mancho, Agata's father, remarked disapprovingly, "Athletes have a different kind of life. Endless training camps, exhaustive practices. I still don't understand why you rushed into marriage." To this reasonable question, the young couple couldn't provide an answer. The first 3 years of their married life resembled a series of fleeting encounters. Olivio shuttled between the capital and Prague, while his young wife eagerly anticipated their rare meetings. Only later did he realize that Agata was portraying herself as a devoted wife and friend. In reality, she was primarily concerned about the money Olivio was earning. In his absence, she indulged herself in every way, attending parties and other recreational events. Of course, her husband had no idea about the lifestyle his young wife led. As Olivio's contract came to an end, he declared to his partner, "I can't and don't want to live like this anymore. I'm tired of it all, and I'm no longer young enough to be shuttling back and forth. I dream of having a normal family, and I want us to have at least a couple of children." Agata mysteriously smiled and gently wrapped her graceful hands around his neck like ivy leaves. "Darling, it's not the right time for changes now, because we'll soon have a third member in our family. And that means we'll have significant expenses." The man instantly forgot about his fatigue. He held his wife so tightly that she almost choked. Then he carried her in his arms for a long time, making the most extravagant promises. "Agata, after such news, I'm ready to move mountains. I promise that you and our little one will never be in need of anything." Could he have known then that by making this promise to his wife, he was signing his own sentence? The terms of the new contract offered to him were much tougher than the previous ones. But Olivio was willing to make such sacrifices for the sake of his family's well-being. Only one circumstance caught the young legionnaire off guard. Within the team he was now required to defend, there was his longtime adversary, Santiago Nieto. But this fact was revealed later, when it was already impossible to change anything. When the former players of the school team met in the locker room before practice, Santiago hissed maliciously, "Olivio? What wind blew you in here? I thought I'd never see you again. And yet here you are. But I warn you, you'd better keep your distance from me." Olivio himself was uncomfortable encountering his old adversary, and he tried to avoid him. However, during a significant match, they had to step onto the ice together. The opponent was tough, and after the first period, Olivio was quite exhausted. But he knew he couldn't count on being replaced, as that condition was stipulated in his contract. He had no choice but to ask Santiago for help. During a short break in the game, Olivio said without much preamble, "Listen, Santiago, I'm not in my best state today. Cover for me." "Sure, no problem. We're on the same team today, after all." But Santiago didn't keep his promise. Towards the end of the second period, during a critical situation, he was on the other end of the field. A fierce altercation ensued, and three forwards from the opposing team converged on Olivio. One particularly aggressive player swung his stick at his back. After the hit, unbearable pain shot through Olivio, and he fell to the ice. The team's doctor rushed over and administered a painkiller injection. Olivio managed to play until the end of the game, but afterwards he could barely make it to the locker room, where Santiago was leisurely sprawled out on a bench. "What is it, Olivio? Did they hit you pretty hard?" This seemingly innocent question triggered a fit of rage in the guy. "And you're smirking. You promised to cover my back, but you disappeared who knows where." Santiago guiltily lowered his gaze and, just like in their distant childhood, stammered, "Olivio, I'm sorry, it just happened. At some point, I completely forgot about you, and when I realized, it was too late to intervene." "Yeah, don't worry. You know that these kinds of situations often happen during the game. You'll forget about this little trouble tomorrow." The next morning, Olivio couldn't get out of bed. His arms worked normally, but his legs refused to obey. He couldn't feel them at all. Fear and panic paralyzed the guy's mind, and an image of the fortune teller popped into his memory, causing him to scream, "What a witch! You've cursed me!" For many months, Olivio had to undergo treatment in various clinics, but medical procedures offered little relief. He became unable to move properly and take care of his daily needs. As a result, a wheelchair appeared in their cozy apartment shortly after the birth of their little Julio. However, such an object greatly irritated Agata, and every time she passed by the wheelchair, she kicked it with her feet. This abnormal habit of his wife contributed to the deterioration of their relationship. The second factor that fueled the arguments was acute financial scarcity. Agata had grown accustomed to living extravagantly and was unwilling to accept the need to cut back on many expenses. One day, she coldly declared, without considering the emotional impact it could have on her husband, "Olivio, I married a healthy man who could provide for us and Julio. But I couldn't have foreseen that I'd have to take care of a disabled person. I apologize for being so candid, but it's better to tell the truth than to live a lie forever. I'm still young, and I don't plan on spending the rest of my life as a nurse by your bedside." He was stunned by the cynicism of the woman he had once shared his life with. For a moment, he even thought he had misheard. But looking into his wife's eyes, he saw icy emptiness there. As calmly as possible, Olivio said, "Agata, I don't hold you back. You're free to leave." The woman froze in astonishment. "Wait a minute, buddy. You want to kick me out with a little child?" "No, darling, that's not how it's going to work. I'll fight for my share of the property in court. I'm your wife, and I have every right to half of it, and Julio has rights too." On that day, Olivio Vega realized for the first time that fame is a fleeting phenomenon. It's like a little star in the night sky. It shines for a short while and then fades away. And then a person is left alone with the eternal cold of the universe. This is how Olivio felt after that fateful conversation with his wife. The legal proceedings dragged on for over 2 years. Despite her husband's disability, Agata was unwilling to yield her position. Her father supported her, providing the help of an expensive lawyer. Olivio didn't have such strong support, so he had to rely only on his own strength. Although Agata had taken her belongings out of the apartment, she would still come daily to make her ex-husband's life miserable. After months of such uneasy living, Olivio began to fear every phone call and knock. Living in a state of constant tension was unbearable, and during one of the visits by his ex-wife, he asked, "Agata, I don't understand what you're trying to achieve." The woman pursed her thin lips and replied succinctly, "Justice. And do you think you're doing the right thing by pressuring me? And why did you take Julio away? It's cruel on your part to deny me the chance to see my son." Agata had never concerned herself with her husband's mental well-being, and she straightforwardly expressed her point. "Olivio, don't hide behind your disability. Before the law, we are all equal. And about our son, I can say one thing: no one is preventing you from seeing him. On the contrary, I encourage you, as a responsible father, to contribute to Julio's upbringing. You can meet with him anytime. You know my parents' address." The man shouted, "Why are you spinning this whole yarn when you know perfectly well that I can't move without outside help?" The woman smirked cynically. "Those are your problems. I couldn't care less how you handled them." Agata looked at him with a disapproving gaze, and, a few seconds later, the door to the apartment slammed loudly. Once again, Olivio was left alone with his grim thoughts. He understood that his wife was simply toying with him, but there was nothing he could do. However, time passed, and problems accumulated like a snowball. The resolution of the property issue was dragging on, and in order to somehow make his life easier, Olivio had to hire a carer. The meager financial resources only allowed him to hire someone on an hourly basis. Valeriana, a nurse from the clinic where he underwent rehabilitation every 6 months, agreed to these terms. This kind-hearted girl tried unsuccessfully to instill hope in his heart. "Olivio, you're acting like a child, and that won't do. Remember what Sergio told you. You have to believe in yourself. In medicine, there are unique cases of complete recovery after such serious injuries, so you shouldn't give up hope. Believe in yourself and follow the doctor's recommendations." Valeriana was full of optimism, something her stubborn patient completely lacked. Since Olivio had voluntarily given away all his savings, he barely had enough for his basic needs and medications. Therefore, he had to pay for the caregiver's services, and Olia, who had recently retired, agreed to this arrangement. In order to save a bit, Olia decided to temporarily move in with her son. Upon learning that the apartment, whose fate was being decided in court, was now occupied by the former son-in-law's mother, Mancho was outraged. One day, he showed up unannounced and immediately started a quarrel. "Olia, aren't you ashamed of yourself? You've come here to make an already tense situation even more complicated. My daughter and I see your interference as an attempt to leave our only grandson without a roof over his head. If I were you, any grandmother would convince her son to withdraw his claims on this unfortunate apartment instead of plotting schemes." Such undisguised audacity from the matchmaker angered the woman. Olia barely restrained her desire to slap the smug face of the psychotherapist, but she understood the consequences that such an act of aggression could bring and limited herself to words. "No, Mancho, it's not me but you who should be ashamed. You and your adventurous daughter managed to strip my son down to his last penny. Not even his disability stops you. But his suffering isn't enough for you. You're trying to take away his only home." Mancho decided to use his final argument. "Stop crying, Olia. You have a splendid apartment in the village. Instead of whining here, you could take your son to live with you and take care of him there. And if you have problems with that, there are special institutions for the disabled. By the way, I can help you with that. I have connections." Olia was shocked when the meaning of the matchmaker's words finally hit her. "Ah, you degenerate. Are you suggesting that I send my own son to a special medical center? That will never happen. But you, scum, are sure to end up in such a place. Your own daughter will send you there." The verbal duel was taking place in the hallway, and it's unknown how this dispute would have ended if Valeriana hadn't intervened. Upon hearing the shouting, she rushed out of Olivio's room and addressed the quarreling parties. "Have you no shame? Stop this right now." While this admonishment was primarily directed at the uninvited guest, it had the opposite effect. Mancho was further incensed when he saw the young woman. "Oh, I had no idea things had gotten this far. The son-in-law not only brought his crazy mother to live with him, but also brought a girl into someone else's apartment?" Olivio had been listening to the conversation from the beginning, but didn't want to intervene. Only when his father-in-law crossed the line did he finally lose his patience. He emerged from his hiding place and, as calmly as possible, asked his former father-in-law, "Mancho, please leave." But Mancho didn't want to calm down. "Goodness, look at this. Our little wonder just wheeled out." Olivio felt a rush of heat cover him from head to toe, and for the first time in 2 years, he stood up. Startled, Mancho rushed to the door, while the two women cried tears of joy. Olia, through her tears, whispered, "Oh Lord, a miracle has happened." Valeriana, Olivio is standing. For just a few seconds, the man stood there, looking around, but those moments were enough for him to believe in himself again. He was no longer concerned about his wife and her father, nor did he want to think about the upcoming court hearings that would determine the fate of the apartment. His heart rejoiced at his first victory over his affliction. "Mom, Valeriana, I'm standing. Look, I'm standing on my own." Upon learning of this miracle, the attending physician wasn't surprised. It's not a miracle, but a natural response of the body to extreme stress. Similar occurrences are not uncommon in paralyzed individuals. Under the influence of intense emotional tension, brain centers become activated. To put it simply, they remember what the body should do in a critical situation. However, all of this happens reflexively. In our case, though, we can certainly note positive progress. After a thorough examination, Sergio advised, "It's hard to say how successful the restoration of functions could be at this point, but to expedite the process, it might be a good idea to undergo an additional course at a reputable clinic." Olivio let out a heavy sigh. "But such supplementary treatment is probably very expensive, isn't it? I doubt I can afford such luxuries in my current situation. After all, I can't exactly live the high life on a disability payment." Sergio didn't respond immediately. Unfortunately, private healthcare can offer us much more today than public clinics. And of course, such a course wouldn't come cheap. But when it comes to health, any person is willing to sacrifice everything. Many people sell their houses and apartments. Thank you, doctor, I understand. If possible, could you provide me with the address of this clinic? I will not only give you the address, but I'll also prepare the documents myself and submit the request. And I'll do all of this for you completely free of charge, Olivio. The doctor smiled and admitted, with embarrassment, "You know, I love hockey and am your fan. So, I'd be happy to do something useful for you." Sergio kept his promise and personally contacted the best clinic in Germany, where his friend from the institute worked. Now, all that was left was to gather the necessary amount of money. Olia cheered up her son, saying, "Don't worry, Olivio, we'll find a way. We can even sell my apartment." Olivio immediately dismissed that option. "No, Mom, your place will still come in handy for us. If the treatment is successful, I'll return to our lovely town and find work at the station." "Son, but you don't have specialized education." "That's okay, I can be a janitor or a stoker, the position doesn't matter." As hard as Agata and her father tried, the court ruled that the property acquired during the marriage should be divided equally. This marked the disabled man's second victory over his circumstances. Olivio sold his apartment and used all the proceeds for treatment in Germany. Before leaving, he called his ex-wife. "Agata, I'm going abroad for a long time, and before I leave, I'd like to see our son." Since the young woman considered the court's decision unfair, she responded with undisguised displeasure. "It seems we've already discussed this. Of course, I can't prevent you from meeting Julio, but you'll have to come here, and I'll take Julio out for a walk." Olivio had prepared a substantial amount of money in advance, which he intended to give to his wife during the meeting. He arrived for the meeting by taxi, together with his caregiver. From a distance, he spotted Agata waiting for him near the entrance. Their 3-year-old son was fiddling around next to her, constructing something out of twigs. Olivio hadn't seen his son in a long time, and he immediately felt his breath catch and a suspicious sand-like substance in his eyes. In a soft voice, he called out, "Son! Julio! Come to Daddy." The little one looked at his father with big eyes, then turned to his mother and asked, "Mom, is that my daddy?" Agata nudged the child towards the car, saying, "Yes, Julio, go to him quickly. He's brought you a toy car." Olivio felt awkward because he had completely forgotten that children are supposed to receive toys. Agata stared at him provocatively, and that's when he remembered the envelope. "Julio, Daddy's legs hurt, and he can't go to the store for the toy car himself. Here, in this envelope, there's some money, and Mommy will buy you whatever you want with it." Agata practically snatched the envelope from his hands and immediately began counting the money. Her thin lips tightened, and she forced out, "Is that all?" "Yes, this is all I can give for now." "But you sold your apartment. All the money will go towards treatment. It might seem strange to you, Agata, but I really want to learn to walk again and live a normal life." With a hint of malicious satisfaction, the woman blurted out, "You won't achieve anything, you're just wasting your money." Valeriana had been sitting silently in the back seat of the car all this time, but when Agata expressed her strange sentiment about the costly treatment, the girl couldn't hold back. "How can you say that? You have no heart. What if you were in Olivio's shoes?" The ex-wife approached the car and peered inside. "And who's blabbering away in there?" "Wow. Olivio, you've already found a replacement for me, and here you are complaining about your health. Listen, beauty, remember, I'll never end up in a wheelchair." Agata gave Valeriana another look and returned to her previous position. However, the presence of the young girl in the car dealt a serious blow to Agata's pride, and she decided to take it out on her disabled husband. Agata deliberately ordered in a loud voice, "Julio, it's time for us to go home. It's time for Daddy to leave as well." The boy sat on his father's lap, clearly reluctant to obey his mother's command. Olivio pleaded, "Agata, why are you doing this? Let me spend a little more time with our son." The woman pulled the child out of the car. You'll have lots of new children, won't you? Julio broke free from his mother's grasp and shouted, I want to be with Daddy. But Agata, ignoring the child's tantrum, dragged him towards the entrance. It was this wild scene that stayed with the man for many years. Although, after successful treatment, he saw his son a few more times. Later, he learned that Agata had remarried a prestigious official and moved with him to another city. He didn't know their new address, so the meetings with his son came to an end. Almost a quarter of a century of life passed in just an hour and a half of flight. Olivio had never engaged in analyzing his own mistakes, but now he realized that the main cause of all his decisions and troubles was excessive self-confidence. If it weren't for his inflated ambitions, he wouldn't be so lonely now. Perhaps Olia might have lived until today as well. When he recalled his mother, a pang of pain shot through his heart, and a thought crossed his mind. She really gave me not only the best years, but also a part of her life. Maybe all these trials are sent to me from above so that I can also save someone's life? My son's life? This was the first question he asked himself. However, there wasn't time to ponder the answer because the pristine white airliner had already landed and was gliding smoothly along the runway. Olivio didn't have to wait for his luggage to be delivered since he embarked on this journey lightly. He wanted to get to the hospital where his son was undergoing treatment as soon as possible. He headed for the taxi stand, but unexpectedly, he heard someone calling him. Olivio. He turned around and saw a slightly plump woman running towards him, a woman he could hardly recognize as his ex-wife. With an effort of will, he restrained an exclamation of surprise, and when Agata caught up with him, he politely greeted her. Didn't expect you to meet me. You could have warned me. The woman waved her hand casually. Why are you looking at me like that? What? Have I changed that much? A little. You know, Olivio, I don't even recognize myself anymore and have stopped looking in the mirror. But my concerns aren't of interest to you, are they? The man politely remained silent, and Agata, as if incidentally, remarked, I wasn't planning to meet you, but then I thought it would be more convenient for everyone. Olivio didn't understand why this would be convenient or who his wife referred to as everyone. However, based on his previous experience, he knew it was better not to ask Agata unnecessary questions. They stood silently for a few minutes, like complete strangers, not even making eye contact. Finally, an available taxi pulled up. The man decided it was best to establish some distance and took a seat next to the driver. Agata settled in the back. Her rapid breathing clearly indicated that she wasn't happy with the seating arrangement. Olivio felt a bit sorry for her and decided to ease the awkwardness of the first moments. Turning around, he asked, Agata, tell me, what actually happened to Julio? This question brought tears to the miserable woman's eyes. She began speaking so quickly that her jumbled words were impossible to understand. Olivio tried to interrupt her. Agata, I didn't understand anything. Just tell me simply, what's wrong with our son? But don't shower me with words like hailstones. She sighed heavily. Olivio, everything's bad, even though the doctor said there's still hope for improvement, but you know yourself that doctors can say anything. Personally, I don't believe them. Sobs followed again, and the man gave up trying to talk to his ex-wife. So, in complete silence, they reached the hospital. The man paid the taxi driver and headed to the main entrance. Agata struggled to keep up with him. She was constantly sobbing and elegantly wiping away tears with a white handkerchief. Seeing that her former husband was heading for the information desk, she said quietly, Julio fell off his motorcycle. He has a serious head injury. He's in the intensive care unit now, but they're not letting anyone in. But can we talk to the attending physician? Agata simply nodded in agreement and led the man through the corridors. Near the door with the sign that said no unauthorized entry, the woman took a breath. I came yesterday and this morning as well, but they didn't let me see him. They only allowed me to see him through the partition. The doctor said Julio is in a medicated coma, and he also said there's little hope. Unexpectedly, Olivio tried to console the woman and said, "Still, there's some chance. If there wasn't, the doctor would have said so. It's easy for you to talk because you've always been at a distance and you don't know what it's like when your child is dying." He sharply pushed the woman away from him. "You've probably forgotten under what circumstances we parted ways. Who else would know better than me what it's like to lie like a log when the person closest to you cuts you out of their life?" Agata got angry. "How dare you compare yourself and your son?" The door with the warning sign swung open, and a briskly walking doctor emerged, dressed in medical attire. Passing by, he asked Olivio, "Which of our patients are you interested in?" "Vega. Julio Vega." The doctor looked up at the ceiling, recalling the personal information of his patients. But then Agata spoke up. "I'm sorry, doctor, a little mix-up occurred. Moreno, Julio Moreno. My ex-husband isn't aware that our son changed his last name." The doctor looked at the visitors and invited them to follow him. For a moment, Olivio held back his ex-wife. "Why didn't you tell me that Julio changed his last name? How deceitful and low of you. After this, I don't even want to talk to you anymore." The woman had to keep silent because they had already entered the doctor's office. After a short pause, the physician spoke. "I understand you're the parents of our daredevil. It takes something to go about it like that and barely survive. I must tell you that your son's condition hasn't stabilized yet, so we can't provide any predictions at the moment. But in any case, you'll have to be patient and hope for the best." "Sorry, other patients need me." Olivio asked, "Can we see our son?" "Actually, visits to the intensive care unit are not allowed, but as an exception, I can allow one person to enter for 5 minutes." Agata spoke up. "Let the father go. I'm afraid I won't be able to handle it. This whole environment terrifies me." The woman grabbed the doctor's hand. "Just tell me, what will the consequences be? Will Julio be able to walk or?" The doctor cautiously pulled his hand away and said irritably, "I already explained to you that the patient's current condition doesn't allow for making any predictions right now. But it seems to me that the most important thing is that the young man is alive." The doctor quickly left the room and invited Olivio. "Follow me." Familiar smells hit his nose, and the man immediately remembered the days when he himself lay motionless in a hospital bed. The doctor led him into a small room where he saw a person, their head wrapped in bandages, various devices connected to their hands and chest. The devices emitted soft beeps, and these monotonous sounds made him uneasy. "I remind you, just 5 minutes. He's sleeping now, but you can sit next to him." The doctor left the room, and Olivio cautiously sat on the edge of a chair. He took the lifeless hand of the young man and stared intently at his facial features. "Julio, you've grown up without me. Perhaps you wouldn't have encountered trouble if I had been by your side." Unexpectedly, the young man's eyelids twitched and slowly began to rise. His hazy gaze fixed on Olivio's face, and his cracked lips whispered, "Who are you?" "I'm your father." Julio tried a smile. "No, my father is completely different, and the last thing I would want is to see him." "Julio, you can't talk. I'm your real father, Vega Olivio. Don't you remember me at all?" The young man attempted to smile again. "Well, yes. Now I recognize you, but you've changed a lot since our last meeting." A nurse peeked into the room. "It's time." Olivio shook his son's hand. "Julio, stay strong. Everything will be all right." The nurse asked in surprise, "Has our patient woken up?" Without waiting for an answer, she rushed out of the room. "Marina, call Arturo. Tell him that Moreno Julio has regained consciousness." Before Olivio could leave the room, the medical staff rushed in. The familiar doctor appeared last. "You're still here? Leave, or I won't let you see your son anymore." Agata was waiting for her ex-husband in the lobby, but she looked a bit calmer and more confident than half an hour ago. "Well, what's the news?" How is he doing? I think he's fine. We even talked to him. The woman burst out yelling and began to gesture vigorously with her hands. How can anyone call themselves fine after such an injury? He woke up yesterday too, but didn't recognize me. I have a feeling, intuition tells me that this will end badly. Olivio couldn't hold back. Agata, for whom will it end badly? For you? Or for Julio? The woman breathed as if she had gills under her skin. What's the difference? Well, let's say, for me. My husband and I have a daughter, and I can't leave her to the mercy of fate. How inconvenient everything is. And what am I going to do if he becomes disabled? And on top of that, of all times, we have to decide something about moving. The man was surprised. Are you leaving? Olivio, I don't even know what to do. Everything has come together at one point, this damn accident. I didn't tell you that Julio crashed on a motorcycle. Luckily, he remembered to wear his helmet. But he has such an uncontrollable temperament. He had a fight with Viola. Viola is Julio's fiancée. So, he decided to prove something to her. And I've been telling him for a while that this headstrong girl is not for him. But do grown-up sons ever listen to their mothers? Olivio felt like all his thoughts had become jumbled in his head. Agata, please, stop for a moment. I still don't understand the connection between the accident and moving. Yes, the most direct connection. My husband has been working to secure a position in the capital for over 10 years, and finally, the opportunity arose. And then this accident happened. My dear son has caused this. He always does things to spite me. Olivio raised his voice. Stop dramatizing. You're a mother. How can you speak about your son like that? Let your husband go to the capital alone, and you stay with your son. But I can't leave my husband alone. He's completely helpless. And you know, ex-husband, family stability meant a lot to me. But you wouldn't understand that. The man clenched his fists. He really wanted to tell this fading egoist everything to her face, but he didn't want to create a scene in the hospital, so he just whispered quietly. Agata, you haven't changed a bit. You're still the same wretch. You left me helpless once, and now you want to abandon your son to fate. Leave, or I can't vouch for my actions. He didn't even spare a glance for his ex-wife, but Agata followed him for a while outside. Olivio, you have to understand me. I'm just an ordinary, weak woman, and I can't bear such a burden. Her lamentations made his blood boil and his head spin. To get rid of her, he hailed a taxi. Driver, do you know of an affordable hotel around here? The driver didn't even look at the passenger. The most budget-friendly place is a hostel, although the comfort there is minimal. But the prices are reasonable. You can stay there for a few days without spending much. The taxi driver took him to the outskirts of the city, where he checked into a third-rate hotel. The room was meant for 3 people, but there were no companions at the moment. Olivio decided to take a stroll to clear his mind. Once again in the past few days, Olivio remembered his mother. He wandered through the park, mentally conversing with her. How I wish you were here now, Mother. You would have advised me on what to do. I can't leave Julio alone in this hospital. Since Olia joined the majority some time ago, she couldn't provide her son with the right solution. The man sat down on a bench and began to greedily inhale the fresh air. Suddenly, his mobile phone rang. Olivio was relieved. Finally, someone remembered me. As it turned out, at such a late hour, Domingo decided to get in touch. Olivio, you promised to call back. How are things going over there? Not well, Domingo. My son is in critical condition, so I can't return right now. Don't worry about work, and signal if you need anything. After all, we're friends and comrades. Friends should help each other. Thank you, Domingo. I feel awkward asking, but I really can't manage without your help. Olivio briefly explained the situation to Domingo. The station chief listened and added his comments. What a nightmare. How can the world still harbor women like your Agata? She doesn't even deserve to be called a woman. She's worse than a sneaky viper. Olivio, don't be upset. Stay with your son as long as needed, and we'll figure something out about the money. I'll talk to the guys. After the conversation with the station chief, Olivio felt a bit better and headed to the hotel. The next morning, he was at the hospital by 7 a.m., but contrary to his expectations, they didn't let him into the ICU. A nurse popped out for a moment and spoke in a hurry. Arturo said not to let you in. She seemed about to retreat behind the transparent door again, but the man stopped her. What happened? Yesterday, everything seemed fine. I even talked to my son. He got worse during the night, but don't be upset. Such things can happen with such injuries. The nurse hurried away, leaving Olivio in the hallway. He spent the entire day in exhausting anticipation, and only in the evening, a different doctor emerged. Are you Moreno's father? Olivio cursed inwardly as the unfamiliar surname grated on his ears. Yes, doctor. Please tell me, how is he? The doctor averted his gaze. Unfortunately, I have no good news for you. Your son's condition has deteriorated sharply, but we haven't given up hope. Can I see him? All right, go ahead. The doctor said it as if he were allowing a last glimpse of a doomed person. And perhaps that was the case, as Julio's body was racked with convulsions, and the medical staff never left his side. Only the complex machines, responsible for vital functions, persistently beeped. But these sounds no longer seemed so bothersome to the distraught father, because they signified that his son was fighting for his life. Olivio couldn't remember how he left the hospital. He once again wandered the streets of the unfamiliar city for a long time, and then headed to the park. He didn't hold back his tears. God, is there really no way to save him? Why is everything like this? First me, and now my son? It's all because of you, my dear. You and your son share the same fate. Olivio felt like the voice came from the depths of hell itself. He jumped up as if scalded, and only then did he notice a female silhouette lurking in the shadows of the trees. In the deepening twilight, this presence seemed ominous. But the stranger reassured him. Don't fear me, I won't cause you any harm. All your troubles have fallen upon your head, and now your son is under threat. But he will survive if you find the one who helped you, protected you, and cared for you. You didn't notice all of this, you just moved on. But she believed in you, and you have more grandchildren to come. Don't reject love, love heals. This woman didn't look like a gypsy, but her voice immediately reminded him of Anarita. For a few minutes, the man stood in shock. He wanted to move, but his legs seemed glued to the spot. He thought the fortune teller had hypnotized him because everything that followed happened as if in a dream. Olivio couldn't remember how he got back to the hotel, and only in the morning did he fully come to his senses. His hand instinctively reached for his mobile phone, and he was surprised to find 5 missed calls. The number seemed familiar, but he couldn't recall who it belonged to. He had to make a return call. Sarah answered with delight. Olivio. Finally, it's you. Yes, I wasn't hiding anywhere. I just fell into a deep sleep last night and didn't hear your calls. Nevertheless, Sarah, it's still pleasant to hear your voice. Especially since I forgot to thank you for the pastries. The woman was surprised. What pastries? The ones you treated me to a few days ago. Remember my birthday? Oh, yes. So much happens here every day that one might even forget their own name. Olivio, Domingo approved a bonus for you, and I'll transfer it to your account tonight. You'll have the money. You really need it right now. Thank you, Sarah. I'm indeed facing a financial crisis at the moment. I never thought I'd have to stay in the city. I'm forced to stay in a hotel, and that means extra expenses. Olivio, I don't want to intrude in your personal life, but I can help you with accommodations. You see, I have a distant relative in the city, my father's aunt. She's still quite lively and very kind. If you're interested, I can call her and let her know. Well, it's a bit awkward. No, it's perfectly fine. Felicia has hosted lodgers before. She says it makes life more interesting for her. By the way, my daughter Juana lives there too. She's studying in the city. This last piece of information was decisive, and Olivio agreed to follow Syrah's advice. He didn't delay the move and quickly packed his belongings. Juana wasn't surprised when she saw the man at the doorstep. Come in, my mom called, and she asked me to welcome you kindly. The cashier's daughter looked more like an angular teenager than a grown woman. But this resemblance gave her a unique charm. Olivio, please don't take offense, our conditions here are far from luxurious. No worries, I'm not picky. I just need a place to lay my head. Juana led him to a small room. Grandma went to see the neighbor, she'll be back soon. She's our street's chief informant. If she starts asking you questions, just stay silent. Thanks for the advice, Juana. Can I ask you something? About what? How can you find a person you haven't seen in over 20 years? Oh, that's easy. There's even a TV show for that. And you can also try searching through social media. The man shrugged helplessly. Unfortunately, I'm not tech savvy. I barely managed to get the hang of a button phone. That's surprising. I thought you were more advanced. After all, you used to be an athlete. Back in my youth, such technology didn't exist. The girl made a funny face. What am I going to do with you? I guess I'll have to help. Write down the details of the person you're trying to find for me on a piece of paper. The man complied with the girl's request, and she promised. I'll try to find Valeriana Castro. You just hang out by the TV for now. But before Olivio could settle down by the TV, the landlady appeared. The elderly woman called from the doorway. Juana, has our lodger arrived? A voice from somewhere deep within the house replied. Yes, Felicia. He's in the living room, waiting for you. Why haven't you fed the poor man? You're the landlady, so it's your responsibility. This back and forth banter lifted Olivio's spirits a little, and he walked into the hallway where Felicia was changing into slippers. Hello, I'm the lodger. The old lady gave him a once-over and declared with satisfaction. Well, young man, not bad at all. And you're tall too. This time, the man couldn't hold back his laughter. But his cheerfulness seemed suspicious to the landlady. Why are you laughing so much? I'm sorry, I absolutely didn't mean to offend you. It's just that no one has called me a young man in a long time. Felicia didn't keep him waiting for a response. Well, for me, all men are like children. They live until they're gray-haired and still act like little boys. That's how my late husband was. Beware the guest's fate, Juana warned. Felicia, you can tell Olivio about your husband and the neighbors later. Let's have lunch, my stomach is twisting itself into knots. Felicia immediately switched to her granddaughter. The youth these days are insane. Even Juana here leads an improper life. Stays up late on the computer. I've told Syrah so many times to influence the girl, but my words bounce off like peas against a wall. The elderly woman suddenly froze with her mouth open, and Juana commented, Well, Uncle Olivio, get ready for an interrogation with an edge. Felicia clicked her tongue at the girl. Don't meddle where you're not asked. The old lady turned to the guest. Tell me, what are your intentions regarding my Syrah? The man almost choked and had to take a drink of water. Only then did he respond. Felicia, I didn't quite understand you. Syrah and I simply work for the same organization and live in the same city. The elderly woman was clearly disappointed by such an answer. What a shame. I thought that Syrah had finally found a man. She wasn't married for long, she got herself a scoundrel. He fathered a child and disappeared. Juana shouted. Felicia, how much longer are you going to bring up that story? And where did you pick up such words? The old lady retorted. I've been learning from you. I hear you talking on the phone with your friends, using words that make my ears wilt. Despite the heated dispute between the relatives, the atmosphere in the house was relaxing and calm. The last time Olivio experienced such feelings was during his youth in his mother's home. He couldn't help himself. How wonderful it is here. Juana promised. It will be even better if you find common ground with Felicia. If you're not hungry anymore, let's go to my room. I've found something for you there. The man stared at the girl with a puzzled look. Juana laughed. You're something else. You asked me to find Valeriana Castro, and now you've forgotten? She looked at him imploringly. Olivio, tell me honestly, why do you need to find Valeriana? To save my son. Olivio, not knowing why, told the teenager-like girl about his plight. Juana listened to him with bated breath, and when he fell silent, she confidently said, I know how to find Valeriana. Although I doubt she can help your son much. Olivio, can I go with you to the hospital? Maybe I can help your son. Olivio agreed to this offer, even though he didn't know how this girl could help Julio. Juana showed him several photographs, and Olivio confidently pointed to one. This is definitely her. It turns out she understands the modern world better than I do. Juana smiled, pressed something, and began to speak. Judging by everything, Valeriana isn't married, and based on the photos, she doesn't have children. Oh, I can feel my mother's scolding coming my way as soon as she finds out I'm helping you find women. Let's not tell her anything. Let it be our little secret. Olivio smiled. He felt as if he were in his childhood home once again. Of course, let it be. Especially since my relationship with your mother is strictly professional. That's for you. But my mother's relationship with you is entirely different. Although, you know, it seems like she's fixated on you and doesn't see anything else around her. Fernando has been wagging his tail for a while now. Fernando is a really good guy. He's so genuine, and he loves my mother without interfering in your suffering. Olivio sighed. You know, Juana, I've grown accustomed to living alone. I can't even imagine having someone constantly by my side. Juana turned to him. You can't be like that. You see, a person shouldn't live alone. Well, they can live alone, but in their lives, there should always be someone else. Always. Do you know why lone wolves are feared? Because they're angry at everyone, they're dangerous, Olivio raised his hands. That's enough, Juana, enough. I get it. As soon as Julio gets better, I'll definitely look for someone to be with. But right now, I can't think about that. Juana turned to the computer. All right, let's write her a letter. It seems she isn't online very often. She was there 2 days ago, but let's hope it won't be too long until she's back. So, we'll tell her we found her. She'll reply, and what next? Will you ask her to come? Or maybe she has a job, a career. Anything's possible. And let me tell you something more. Olivio lowered his head, as if she were gathering his thoughts. You see, when I was young, I also met a fortune teller. Although, I should probably start somewhere else. First, I met a coach. I didn't speak to him very nicely, even though I owed everything to him. Then came the fortune teller, who essentially told me the same thing he did. But she added that very soon I would be as unhappy as I am now. I won't hide it, her words had an impact on me. Maybe I wouldn't have been able to change anything anyway. Now there's another fortune teller. The most interesting thing is that I didn't get a good look at her, I didn't examine her closely. But her voice was exactly like that of Honorita. Do you understand? She said that I've entrusted my destiny to my son. And only, well, from what I understood, only Valeriana can help. I can't even imagine, if she replies, what I should do next, how to behave, or what to say. But I need to find her, I'm certain of it. Juana listened to him in a trance. As it turned out, they had one more listener whom they hadn't noticed. Felicia had entered the room and sat down on the couch. Even though nobody's asking for my opinion, I'll say this, I had an acquaintance who had a fortune teller say something to her too, and she just dismissed it. And everything she predicted started coming true. And all the bad stuff at that. One thing after another. And she herself went to the gypsies. That's where they told her that you can't just brush it off. Gypsy predictions are elusive, and if the fortune teller started talking herself, then maybe something could still be fixed. If my acquaintance had listened then, she would have definitely found a way out. But now it's too late. She got herself worked up again, shouting, "How much money do you want me to give you to stop saying this?" And the old gypsy just shook her head. She said that if she wanted, she could give away all her money because she wouldn't need it anymore. Can you imagine that? To top it all off, that same evening she got hit by a car, and she definitely didn't need the money anymore. Her own children put her in a wheelchair and admitted her to hospice, with all the paperwork saying she wasn't in her right mind. She died there a year later. Why am I telling you this? If the fortune teller said something can be fixed, you should grab onto it and go for it head on. Olivio smiled in relief. You know, it feels so easy with you. You're like family, you care. Felicia stood up. You certainly disappointed me by not planning to marry Sarah, but you're clearly not a bad guy. So, I wish you all the best in dealing with everything. Olivio stood up as well. Thank you very much. The old woman turned to Juana. And for you, dear, it's time to sleep. It's already past midnight. Juana laughed. Yes, Capitan. And then winked at Olivio. Early in the morning, Olivio headed to the hospital, where the doctor invited him to his office. Are there any changes? The doctor nodded. To be honest, I don't even know where to start. As you understand, there was a crisis yesterday. Your son went through such a critical period that he might not have come out. But somehow, he made it. Olivio jumped up. So you mean Julio will survive? The doctor nodded. Hold off on celebrating just yet. I won't get into the details, let me put it in simpler terms. In these moments, the brain is practically at war with itself. It's analyzing the body and deciding what it can shut down so that the rest can function without problems. This time, his brain shut down his legs. Understand, we performed surgery. From a physics, mechanics, and practical standpoint, we fixed everything in Julio's body. But the brain is still so poorly understood that you never know what to expect from it. So, during the crisis, it shut down his legs. Your son won't be able to walk. That's just to make sure you understand. Olivio remained silent for a while, and in his mind, the words kept echoing, your son is repeating your destiny. But he managed to do it, he managed to stand up. Which means we'd get Julio back on his feet too. The doctor seemed to be waiting for something from him. Olivio stood up. I got you, doctor. We will fight, I'm sure we can handle this. I don't understand. You're not leaving? And right now, I don't understand, where should I go if my Julio is in such a condition? The doctor shrugged. The thing is, Julio's mother, your ex-wife, left today. She warned not to bother her because she's going far away with her family. Olivio collapsed into a chair. What a heartless beast. Well, I shouldn't be surprised. She did the same to me once, but I thought she wouldn't abandon her son. I want you to know, I'll never leave Julio. We haven't been together since childhood, so every minute is precious to me. They stood up, the doctor shook his hand, and Olivio mustered the courage to ask. Tell me, are there any chances at all? The doctor looked at him closely. I could lie to you, talk about the resilience of a young body, and all that. But I'll be honest, the chance is 1 in 100,000. Usually, after such injuries, a person remains disabled for life. But 1 in 100,000 is still a chance, right? The doctor sadly smiled. I sincerely hope that you're the one who gets that chance. Olivio asked for permission to let someone else visit, and the doctor said, Get passes from the nurse. How many do you need? We allow relatives to visit bedridden patients at any time. You should understand that, like everywhere else, we're short on staff. So, when family members are nearby, it's much easier for the patient, both mentally and physically. He stopped in front of the ward. The doctor mentioned that Julio was conscious today. Olivio took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Julio lay still, his head was bandaged, and he had a medical collar around his neck. "Hello, son." Julio looked at him in surprise, then smiled faintly. "I thought you were in my dream." Olivio sat down next to him. "No, I came right away as soon as Mom called me." "She left?" Olivio looked away, but then met his son's gaze directly. "Yes, she left. But it doesn't mean anything. I'll be by your side for as long as you want." "Why?" "We haven't seen each other, and you don't even know me." "But you're my son, how could I not know you?" Julio remained silent for a while, then asked, "Did Mom divorce you?" "Yes." "Why?" Olivio was taken aback. Did Agata not tell him anything? Then he thought that telling the truth was not in Agata's best interest. "I used to play hockey, I was at the peak of my fame, and then I got injured and ended up in a wheelchair. Mom told me straight up that she didn't need me anymore." "Did you abandon me?" "No, son. I really wanted to see you, but Agata was against it. She was very upset when she didn't get our apartment. And she was even more upset when I used my share for treatment instead of giving it to her. She told me a completely different version about how you kicked her out with a little child. That's why I didn't try to contact you. Now I understand that I've always known that Mom." "Okay, let's not talk about this," Olivio reassuringly patted his hand. They talked a bit more, and Julio fell asleep. Olivio left. He needed to buy something, vitamins, something healthy. He approached the nurse, asked for a pass, and also inquired about what to bring for his son. "Oh, I actually prepared a list for you, what's allowed, what's needed, and what's not." Olivio smiled. "I'm starting to think that the most compassionate people live in your city." "Seriously?" The girl laughed. "Well, that's true. We not only have the kindest people, but also the most wonderful city." Juana immediately expressed her desire to accompany him to the shops. "Olivio, you'll definitely buy something wrong. And you might not check the expiration date, but I always do." "Juana, but you probably have your own things to do?" "It doesn't matter at all. Consider that I've taken responsibility for you and Julio. And then I'll go to the hospital with you, and you'll introduce us. You understand that Julio will be lying here for a while, and the only visitors he'll have are you. It's so easy to die of boredom. So, I'll take care of the entertainment part." Olivio sighed heavily. "Juana, there's something else. I understand that Julio doesn't know yet, and I don't know how he'll react when he finds out. The doctor said that Julio won't be able to walk anymore." Julio's eyes widened, and then he whispered, "Oh my God, we must support him with all our might." In the evening, laden with bags containing special clothing, fruits, and yogurt, Olivio and Juana appeared at the hospital again. "Julio, here come the guests." Julio looked at Juana in surprise. She darted around the room as if she had 100 batteries in her. "This is Juana, she's the daughter of my colleague from work, and right now I'm staying with her and her grandmother. Juana, this is my son, Julio. I can't say anything else right now because I don't know much myself." Julio smiled. "There's not much to tell. I graduated from university, got a job at a good company. My mother's husband wasn't very pleased because, according to his calculations, I was supposed to work for his friend. But I was interested in both money and a career equally. In the place he directed me to, I wouldn't expect either of those. I have a very beautiful, smart, and ambitious girlfriend. We had an argument on the day when it's my fault entirely. One must know how to control oneself. Overall, Viola is a good person. We're planning to get married. I think she'll come today. Maybe she went to her parents' place. Viola sometimes does that when we argue. Juana interrupted him. Do you have your own apartment? No, not yet. I'm renting an apartment and we're living there. Viola, of course, isn't very happy about it. She would like us to move into our own apartment after the wedding, but that's still a dream. Juana and Olivio exchanged glances, but before they could say anything, a girl burst into the room. Olivio and Juana immediately knew who she was. Viola truly was very beautiful. Her lips were gracefully curved, she had a high forehead, sharply defined eyebrows, and huge eyes with beautiful makeup. She confidently stepped into high-heeled shoes, making it clear that this was her everyday attire. Juana was looking at her in admiration and couldn't even find words to say. She could only dream about such outfits and figures. Julio smiled. Viola, I've been waiting for you so much. And Olivio closed his eyes. Suddenly, he realized what was about to happen. His son was about to repeat his fate. He had to stop this Viola, but how? He couldn't force her to be with Julio. Julio, you know I don't like misunderstandings. You perfectly understand that I've always dreamed that we would both build our careers, buy an apartment, a car, live well, and have a good family. As you understand, you've ruined all these plans. Julio attempted to interject. Well, not ruined, just shifted them a bit. When I recover and leave the hospital, we'll immediately start working on making them happen. Viola even squealed. Why are you trying to deceive me? Or do you think I'll be with you out of pity? No, Julio. I don't want a disabled husband. Find some other fool who will put up with you and your problems. Am I disabled? What are you talking about? Oh, they haven't told you yet? Apparently not. Julio, you're not a human anymore, you're a disabled man. You'll never walk again. I'm taking the money we saved for the apartment. Firstly, some of it is my money too, and secondly, it's compensation for your deceit. She swiftly left the room, slamming the door. A heavy silence hung in the room. Then Julio asked quietly, Did Mom know? Olivio understood that his confession would completely break his son and simply didn't know what to say. Julio slowly said, So, she knew. So she left me just like she left you once? The young man closed his eyes, and suddenly Juana spoke up. I always thought that there are no weak people, they're just invented. Because I've always been surrounded by strong people. Boys who don't cry when they scrape their knees, women who were left by their husbands and raised children alone, husbands who were left by their wives and they climbed up as well. But today I've learned that weak people do exist after all. They're the ones who prefer to just run away, not bothering themselves with anything. Skunks. I'm talking about Viola and your mother, Julio. Please forgive me. Julio, who had been lying with his eyes covered, looked at her in surprise, then shifted his gaze to his father. Will you tell me how all of this happened? Yes, son, of course, I will tell you. While they were driving home, Juana remained silent. But once they entered the house, she started talking and gesticulating. We can't give up. We need to do something, you understand? I understand, Juana. Of course, we'll do something. But as far as I understand, the apartment where Agata lived with her husband belonged to her husband, and she left her son with nothing, helpless. I'm still amazed by that woman. But it's okay, we'll go home, figure something out. I work in the railroad industry, so we'll come up with something. Juana sat down at the computer. Oh, Olivio, Valeriana replied. He quickly sat down next to her. Well, what does she say? She's leaving tomorrow morning. Leaving? How come? Juana turned to him. You know, you men explain things so poorly. It will take a year for you to explain everything. Yesterday, after everyone went to sleep, I sent her another message. I told her everything in detail, described everything, and she already got a ticket today. She's asking for the address. Olivio jumped up. Oh, what should we do? We need to book a hotel for her. Felicia had a tendency to appear silently out of nowhere. What? I don't have any space left, do I? We're all connected in this matter. We need to help the boy. Olivio couldn't hold back. He tightly hugged the elderly woman and gave her a loud kiss on the cheek. She laughed and waved her hand. Oh, I can't handle this. How many years has it been since I've been in a man's embrace? But on a serious note, you're a good man, Olivio. It's a sin not to help you. Although, if you had married Sarah, you wouldn't be short of women. The three of them burst into laughter. The next evening, leaving Julio under Juana's care, she definitely won't let him get bored, Olivio went to the train station to meet Valeriana. For some reason, he became nervous, recalling how they had parted. He and his mother were standing by the edge of the train carriage when Valeriana came running. She was out of breath and blushing. Are you really leaving? Olivio nodded. Yes, there's nothing left for me to do here. Valeriana looked at him strangely and hugged him. It was so unexpected that Olivio staggered, and to avoid falling, he embraced Valeriana with both hands. And she whispered, "Remember, if you need me, just call." And Valeriana ran away. His mother then said, "What's wrong with you? The girl loves you." But Olivio said gloomily, "That's enough, I'm fed up with love." They never saw each other again. Olivio had no idea how Valeriana's life had turned out. At first, he remembered her and even felt a bit nostalgic without her. But then, he forgot. He turned his head, unable to recognize the familiar face. "Olivio, isn't your neck hurting?" He stared in amazement at the woman standing next to him, smiling. Valeriana? Indeed, he caught to recognize her. Valeriana seemed taller. Moreover, she had acquired the curves she used to lack. She was stylishly and fashionably dressed. There was a large brown suitcase next to her, and she held a big bag. Well, are you going to stand there like a statue, or are you finally going to say hello? Olivio seemed to awaken, hugged her, and said, "Thank you for coming. But I couldn't not come. Take the suitcase. Where can I stay?" "Well, if you're not scared of a not-so-modern lifestyle, then Felicia invited you to stay with her." "Is that Juana's grandmother?" "Yes, it is." "I understood that both the grandmother and Juana are good people?" Olivio nodded enthusiastically. "Valeriana, they're very good people. Or perhaps I should address you by your full name." Valeriana stopped, looked at him. "Let's consider that a joke." Olivio looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry, please forgive me." "Tell me, Olivio, how have you been living?" "Oh, nothing special. Just living and working." "How's Mom?" "Mom is no longer alive." "I'm sorry." "It's all right." "Valeriana, tell me, will you help me with my son?" "I don't know yet, but I really hope so." Apparently, Olivio's look was skeptical, and Valeriana suddenly asked, "Did you reach out to me because a fortune teller scared you? Do you know what I do?" "No." "What do you do?" Valeriana smiled. "Well, you'll find out very soon." The whole evening passed in conversations, and Olivio hardly participated in them. The women were talking. It turned out that after he left, Valeriana decided that she couldn't stay a nurse anymore. She enrolled in a medical institute, simultaneously studying alternative medicine. Practical medicine combined with non-traditional methods sometimes yields such results that doctors just throw up their hands. But even if folk remedies worked, they still refused to acknowledge it. "Valeriana, what about your job?" She turned to him with a smile. "If you were even a little bit of a Sherlock, you would have known that I'm no longer just Valeriana, but Valeriana Torres, the owner of a private clinic that isn't so easy to get into. Even though people don't believe in alternative treatments, the waiting list for my clinic is a year long." Olivio had a hard time keeping his jaw from dropping. "I'm very happy for you. Just don't think." "Olivio, stop justifying yourself all the time. Even if you had called me only because you knew about the clinic, that would still be normal. You're helping your son, and for that, all means are good. Where is your clinic located? Of course, in the capital. Felicia ordered. All right, my sweeties, I think it's time for everyone to turn in. The girl is tired from the road. I've made a bed for you, Valeriana, in the living room. The doctor, after hearing Valeriana's request to see Julio's medical history, squinted his eyes. Tell me, why do I have this feeling like I've seen you before? She shrugged. I don't know, maybe we could have met at some medical forums. The doctor slapped his forehead. Are you Valeriana Torres? I listened with interest to your presentation, and I remember how you silenced those who didn't believe with a real-life example. But how did my patients find you? Or rather, their relatives? Valeriana looked at Olivio. Well, we've known each other for a very long time. The doctor turned to Olivio. Well, you know. Now I can definitely tell you that the chances have increased significantly. I must admit, I don't really believe in all this either, but there's no smoke without fire. Colleague, let's go. I'll give you all the necessary documents. 2 weeks later, Valeriana said that Julio needed to be transferred to her clinic. Valeriana, tell me, is there hope? She shook her head. I can't say. You see, Olivio, all of a person's problems, well, almost all, are in their head. And that's where we need to look for what will help your son. We might find it quickly, or we might never find it. In the evening, Olivio called Domingo. Domingo, I'm sorry to approach you again, but I need to move my son to the capital. Olivio, why are you saying that? It's not a bother. Call me back in an hour, and I'll figure out the best way to arrange everything. Thank you. And also, yes, Olivio, go ahead. Domingo, forgive me. Forgive me for that conversation. There was a pause on the line, then Domingo said, You remember it, huh? I do, but I lack the courage to apologize. Well, now there are no misunderstandings between us. Don't worry, I'll figure everything out now. Olivio hung up the phone and felt a slight sense of relief. An hour later, Domingo provided the train number and compartment. He mentioned that the conductor was a man who would assist them. Olivio put down the phone and noticed that Juana had tears in her eyes. So, what happened to us? Juana kept turning away, but Olivio gently held her chin. Tell me, what happened? Juana suddenly buried her face in his shoulder and burst into tears. Amid her disjointed speech, Olivio understood one thing: Juana had fallen in love with Julio. It was so unexpected that Olivio was taken aback. Then he remembered their farewell with Valeriana and asked Juana, Did you tell him? No. Why would I? And he probably wonders why he matters to you. He is. Juana looked at Olivio with large, teary eyes. Do you really think so? Yes, I do. Juana jumped up. I need to go to the hospital, urgently. She rushed out of the house like a whirlwind. Olivio shook his head and immediately heard. Are you trying to prevent your son from repeating your fate? He hadn't noticed when Valeriana walked in, and he smirked. I don't want my son to repeat the same mistakes I made. Juana returned almost at night. Her eyes were sparkling, and her smile was radiant. She approached Olivio and pecked him on the nose. Thank you, Olivio. I'll visit Julio in the capital during my vacation. Felicia snorted disapprovingly, but Juana looked at her in such a way that the talkative old lady chose to remain silent. Julio, come on, a few more steps and we'll rest on the bench. Juana, I don't want to rest. Whether you want to or not, you will. And that's not up for discussion. Just over 3 months had passed since they brought Julio to the capital. Juana had visited for the second time, and Julio greeted her as if she were his closest kin. Today, Olivio was supposed to arrive, so they went to the clinic's park to meet him. They sat down on a bench, and Julio asked, Do you think Dad will ever muster the courage to propose to Valeriana? Juana shook her head. I don't think so. You understand, he hurt her once, even if unintentionally. And now she's so important and famous. Julio sighed. Maybe I should somehow help him. No, Julio, no one can help in matters like this. They are adults, after all. Julio sighed again. And you? Juana looked at him in surprise. What about me? When will you marry me? Her hands trembled, and she calmly replied. Well, no one has asked me yet. Julio squinted mischievously. But you said I always know what I want, yogurt or soup. Julio, but that's food. Well, if you know that, then you should know that I want you to become my wife. Juana smiled, but before she could say anything, Julio quickly continued. Juana, I can't offer you anything right now. I will fight very hard to get back to a normal life, to work, so that you won't lack anything. Oh my God, you're so silly. Not everything is measured in money. Leaves rustled nearby, and the young couple spotted Olivio and Valeriana. Dad? We've been waiting for you. How did we not see you? Olivio cleared his throat awkwardly. I arrived yesterday. Had some things to take care of. Juana looked at the embarrassed Valeriana. No way. Did you finally propose? Olivio looked at them in alarm. How do you know? Juana and Julio burst into laughter. Valeriana started laughing too, and then Olivio himself couldn't hold back. It had been a long time since he laughed so freely, not because he had to. Olivio, Julio, what are you doing here? They turned around and stared at Agata. Mom? Agata? The woman scanned them with her eyes, then looked around. Julio smirked. Mom, if you're looking for a wheelchair, there isn't one. I'm walking on my own. Agata pretended to wipe her eyes, went to hug Julio. My dear son, I prayed for you every day. Mom, no need. We know perfectly well that's not true. Agata stepped back and calmly said, How did you end up here? Through acquaintances? They say they use all sorts of witchcraft spells here. Can you talk to someone to help me? You know, my husband is planning to divorce, found himself a young woman. I need them to pass a sentence on him or perform a spell, whatever it's called. You can't refuse me, because the happiness of your sister and mother is at stake. But, Mom, I don't even know what you're talking about. What spells? Is it hard for you to make an effort for your mother? Well, okay, tell me who to approach, and I'll say I'm your mother. Valeriana couldn't hold back. Woman, you need to heal your own mind, not your husband's. Agata challenged her. Don't meddle in what's not your business. I'm the owner of this clinic, and I can tell you for sure, you won't get any help here. Valeriana turned to Julio. Julio, it's time for therapy right now. Juana, help him. Valeriana turned around, took Olivio by the arm, and they all headed towards the hospital. Agata just stood there. Her lips moved, and she cursed those leaving behind her. What you wish upon others comes back to you twofold. Good begets good, and evil begets evil. Agata shuddered and saw an old gypsy woman nearby. She could have sworn that a second ago there was no one there. The gypsy woman calmly stared at her. Just go away, all of you. Agata rushed to the park's exit without looking back, not wanting to see those piercing black eyes.